Welcome back to the deep dive. We're here again taking some pretty dense financial sources and breaking them down into something clear, something actionable for you.
That's the plan.
And today,
Yeah.
we are really getting into it with a huge topic, inflation. It feels like this
Mhm.
invisible enemy, right? Affecting everything from, I don't know, your daily coffee to planning for retirement decades down the line.
It absolutely is. And, our mission today isn't just to talk about the scary headline numbers. We want to go deeper.
Right.
We want to give you specific strategies, both defensive and offensive, that you actually need to protect your wealth and maybe more importantly, to actually grow it against this constant pressure.
Okay, so let's unpack that. We've got a bunch of material here, definitions, analogies, lots to chew on. If there's one single thing, one core concept about inflation we need to lock down right now, what is it?
It's the fundamental idea of the permanent reduction of purchasing power. That's the key.
Okay.
Inflation, simply put, is just, well, it's the continuous rise in the general level of prices for goods and services.
Yeah.
Which means that the money you have sitting in your pocket or in the bank today, it just buys less tomorrow. It's this unavoidable economic truth, really. And understanding that is what forces every, prudent saver to completely rethink their whole financial strategy.
That really sets the stage because
Yeah.
it leads perfectly into this idea of the silent threat, doesn't it? One of our sources uses this great analogy, inflation as a money-nibbling mouse, just constantly eating away at the value of your savings.
It's a fantastic visual, actually, because the damage happens quietly, almost invisibly.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
You save, say, 100 units of currency,
Yeah.
maybe put in a bank account earning almost nothing. If inflation is running at, let's say, 3% for the year,
Okay.
the number in your account still says 100, looks fine. But in terms of what it can actually buy, it only has the purchasing power of 97 units.
So 3 units just gone.
Vanished. Not because you spent it, but because that invisible mouse, inflation, just nibbled away its real value, its functional value.
Yeah. And this is where it gets really frustrating for people relying on a regular paycheck, right?
Absolutely.
Like, say you're an employee, you work hard, you maybe get a 2% raise this year. Feels like a win, you know?
Yeah, feels good.
But if inflation is running at 3%, you're actually 1% poorer in real terms.
Exactly.
You have to work harder, you put in more hours, just to end up slightly worse off than you were before.
It forces people, especially those on fixed incomes or with salaries that don't keep up, into this constant race against time, just to maintain their current standard of living.
Yeah.
And what's really critical for you, the listener, to grasp here is this measurable ongoing loss of value is precisely what forces passive savers to become active investors.
Right. You have no choice, really.
Pretty much. You have to seek out assets that can generate returns higher, ideally significantly higher than the rate of inflation, just to break even, let alone actually get ahead.
Okay, so the effect is clear. Less buying power. Now I need to understand the why. What's driving these price increases? What are the main mechanisms creating this imbalance between what people want and what the economy can actually supply?
Right. There are basically two main drivers. They kind of come from opposite ends of the economic equation.
Yeah.
The first one is demand pull inflation. This is probably the easier one to grasp. It's essentially when total demand from consumers just outruns the available supply of goods and services.
So too many people wanting to buy too few things.
Exactly. When everyone wants to buy more than what's actually available, prices naturally get pulled upwards. It's basic supply and demand.
And what typically causes that? Our sources point to things like big government stimulus programs, right? Pumping money into the economy.
Yeah, that's a big one. Or when central banks cut interest rates really low, that makes borrowing cheap. People feel more confident they spend more.
More money chasing the same stuff.
Precisely. More money chasing roughly the same amount of goods and services means,
Okay.
yeah, prices go up.
Okay, so that's demand pull. What's the other side of the coin?
The second major driver, and this is one we've seen a lot of recently with global disruptions, is cost push inflation.
Okay.
This one comes from the supply side.
Yeah.
The simple explanation is just production costs are increasing.
Right. So businesses have to pay more to make their stuff.
Exactly. Their input costs go up. Think, sudden spikes in the price of oil or energy or key raw materials, maybe metals, maybe agricultural products.
We've definitely seen that. And things like rising labor costs too, right? Maybe due to worker shortages or strong wage demands.
Yep, that fits. Or, like you mentioned, massive supply chain disruptions. Think about geopolitical conflicts or even pandemics shutting down ports or factories.
Yeah.
That stops the flow of components, materials.
And pushes costs up for producers.
Correct. And if their costs go up, they eventually have to raise their prices to protect their profit margins. They push those costs onto the consumer.
Okay, so demand pull from the consumer side, cost push from the producer side.
That's it. And if we tie this back to investing, the key takeaway here is, well, you need to look for businesses that are resilient to both kinds of pressure.
How so?
They need strong demand for what they sell that helps shield them from demand fluctuations. But crucially, they also need pricing power, the ability to pass on those rising input costs from cost-push inflation to their customers.
Without losing them.
Exactly. That's the sweet spot. High demand and pricing power.
Okay, that makes sense. We've got the threat, the causes. Now let's really bring this home. Let's make it concrete for the listener. We need to use those great examples from the sources, the noodle and coffee test, you called it, to show what this actually means for their wallet day to day.
Yes, the everyday examples are powerful because they're so relatable. It's quite a sobering test, actually.
I bet.
Think about, your favorite bowl of noodles from a street vendor, or maybe that essential first cup of coffee in the morning.
Okay.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
What'd that cost? Maybe 30, 35 units for the noodles? Perhaps 50 for the coffee, something like that.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Today, that same bowl of noodles might easily be 60, 70 units. That same coffee could be 70, maybe even 90 units in some places.
Wow, almost double.
Almost double, yeah. Just for the exact same daily habit.
Yeah.
That's inflation right there in your lunch break or your morning routine.
Let's use the rice box example, too, for tracking daily expenses. The numbers were pretty stark.
They are. So let's say a standard lunchbox, rice box costs 50 units today.
Okay.
And let's assume a modest inflation rate, say just 3% per year. Consistent, but not crazy high.
Right.
In 10 years, that same 50-unit rice box will cost you about 67 units.
Okay, so costs more, but what does that mean for savings?
Right, here's the kicker. Imagine you save 10,000 units today. Good job, right?
Right.
That buys you 200 of those 50-unit meals right now.
Makes sense.
But if you just keep that 10,000 units as cash, maybe under the mattress or in the zero interest account for those 10 years, by year 10, when the meal costs 67 units, your 10,000 units will only buy you, let's see, about 149 meals.
Whoa, so you lost the ability to buy, what is that, 51 meals?
51 meals. Gone. Just evaporated because of inflation. That should honestly shock anyone who thinks just holding cash is safe. That's like, what, 2 months of lunches disappearing?
Yeah, easily. Just because the money sat still. And the impact gets even worse for bigger, longer-term goals, doesn't it? Like saving for a child's education.
Oh, absolutely devastating potential there. Take the tuition example from the sources.
Right.
Let's say you diligently start saving today. You put aside 500,000 units, earmarked for your child's university education, maybe 18 years from now.
And it's like a solid plan.
It does. But again, let's factor in that same modest 3% average annual inflation over those 18 years.
Okay.
That 500,000 unit education. When your child is actually ready to enroll, the actual cost will be closer to 850,000 units.
Wow.
So if you only save the initial 500,000 in cash, you'd be 350,000 units short.
That's a huge shortfall. A gigantic hidden expense, as the source calls it.
It is a hidden expense. That's the critical realization here. Inflation isn't some abstract economic concept or a maybe problem for the future. It's happening right now. It's an ongoing expense silently draining your wealth, and it absolutely demands action.
You really can't just save your way to financial security anymore.
Not in the traditional sense of just piling up cash, no.
Right.
You have to find ways to make your money grow faster than prices are rising. You must invest to overcome that built-in deficit.
Okay, investing is clearly the ultimate long-term solution, the offensive strategy. We'll get to that. But before we do, what about defensive moves? Our sources mention some practical steps. Is things like, strict budgeting and cutting costs. Is that really enough when the price of essentials is climbing so fast?
That's a really important question, and the honest answer is no, financial discipline alone isn't the solution. It won't make you wealthy in an inflationary environment.
But it's necessary.
It's absolutely necessary. Think of these defensive moves as like building the foundation. They're about survival, about stabilizing your financial situation so you can then launch that offensive investment strategy effectively.
Okay, so what's the first defensive strategy? Strict financial discipline and reducing expenditure.
Right. This means, first and foremost, really tracking your income and expenses rigorously, knowing exactly where your money is going, and then, yes, cutting unnecessary costs where you can. But the really crucial part of this, especially when inflation is high, is aggressively tackling bad debt.
What qualifies as bad debt here?
High interest debt. Think credit cards, personal loans for, I don't know, luxury goods or things that don't generate income. Why? Because when inflation rises, what do central banks typically do?
They raise interest rates.
Exactly, to cool down the economy. And those higher rates make carrying that bad debt incredibly expensive very quickly. So paying that down or getting rid of it entirely becomes paramount for stability. It frees up cash flow. It makes sense. Get rid of the leaks before you try to fill the bucket. Okay, strategy 2 flips it around. Increasing revenue, focusing on the income side.
Yeah, this is about acknowledging that your main job's salary might not keep pace. It might be fixed, or raises might lag behind inflation.
So you need other sources.
Potentially, yes. Finding side hustles, maybe freelancing, starting a small side business, anything to bring in extra income streams. Or, alternatively, really focusing on developing valuable skills within your main job. Skills that are in demand that allow you to negotiate for pay increases that at least match or ideally beat the inflation rate.
It's like you're in a constant race just to maintain your real income level.
You are. It's a necessary race you have to consciously run. You need to keep your earnings growing faster than that 3% or whatever the current rate is line.
Okay. And the third defensive strategy, holding flexible assets. This sounds a bit like investing already.
It's kind of a bridge, yeah. It's about changing how you hold your savings, not just saving cash. The core idea is hold only the cash you absolutely need for emergencies, for immediate liquidity.
And the rest.
The rest of your savings, the part that isn't immediate emergency fund, our sources suggest shifting into assets whose value tends to rise with inflation. Think tangible things.
Like what?
Things like land or certain types of real estate. These tend to fare better than fixed monetary assets, like cash sitting in a low-interest deposit account.
Yeah.
Their prices are flexible. They could adjust upwards as the general cost of living increases. Cash can't do that.
Got it. So discipline, income boost, flexible savings, those are the defensive walls.
Exactly. They protect you and give you breathing room.
But they don't win the war. That's where the offense comes in. As you said, only proactive investment really gives you that compounding power you need to beat inflation over the long haul. And this is where the value investment or 6 approach comes into play, right? What are the key 6 principles for fighting inflation?
Yes, ACTS offers a very specific framework. We're essentially filtering potential investments using 3 core principles, designed specifically to handle these cost and demand pressures we talked about.
Okay, principle number 1, pricing power, sometimes called the moat. What does that actually mean in practice?
Pricing power is arguably your single strongest defense against inflation as an investor. You need to find businesses that have a really strong competitive advantage that moat around their business.
Like a strong brand. Or maybe they're the only provider.
Exactly. Things like a powerful, differentiated brand people trust and will pay more for. Or maybe they operate in an industry with high barriers to entry, like essential utilities. Or perhaps they have unique technology or network effects.
And this moat lets them do what?
It allows them to raise their prices to cover their own rising costs, that cost push inflation, without losing a significant chunk of their customers. They can pass inflation on.
Ah, okay, so they protect their profit margins.
Precisely. If a business can't raise prices without customers immediately fleeing to a competitor, inflation will just crush its profitability. So strong pricing power is non-negotiable.
Got it. Principle number 2, low debt. Why is this so critical in an inflationary environment? We touched on interest rates.
Yeah, it links directly back to that. High inflation usually forces central banks to hike interest rates, sometimes aggressively.
Right.
For companies carrying a lot of debt, high leverage, their financing costs, the interest they pay on their loans can spike dramatically.
Right.
That hits their bottom line, their profits, almost instantly.
So how do we spot a low debt company? Is there a simple check?
A quick practical metric people often look at is the debt-to-equity ratio. You generally want companies where that ratio is low. It suggests the business's operations and assets aren't overly dependent on borrowed money.
So they're less vulnerable to rate hikes.
Much less vulnerable. Investing in companies with strong balance sheets, low debt. It's crucial for survival, let alone thriving, when inflation and interest rates are volatile.
Okay, pricing power, low debt. And the third principle ties back to that discipline we talked about earlier. Cash is ammunition. Now, this sounds a bit counterintuitive. If cash loses value to inflation, why hold it? Isn't that risky, especially if markets panic?
But this isn't just holding cash passively. This is holding cash strategically. The money you manage to save through that strict financial discipline we discussed earlier, it's not just a safety net.
It's bullets.
Exactly. It becomes your cash bullets. Here's why. Periods of high inflation or fears about inflation often trigger market panic. People get scared, they sell indiscriminately.
Even good companies get dragged down.
Exactly. Even the prices of high-quality companies, those with pricing power and low debt, could get pushed down temporarily during these sell-offs.
I see.
So the disciplined value investor, who understands the real underlying value of these businesses, uses that saved cash, their ammunition, to buy those excellent companies when they go on sale, when they're cheap, because of the market's overreaction.
So you're leveraging the panic.
You're leveraging the market's short-term emotional crisis for your own long-term gain. It definitely requires patience, research, and nerve. You have to be willing to buy when others are fearful. But that's really the essence of value investing in this context.
Pricing power, low debt, cash as ammo. A clear VI strategy. Okay, let's pull back the lens now. Think longer term, say the next 10, maybe 20 years. Our sources give some historical context, noting that while some markets saw extreme peaks in the past, the recent trend before COVID was often lower inflation. But what's the outlook now?
Yeah, the historical context is important. It shows inflation can be volatile. But what's really interesting, and maybe a bit concerning, looking ahead 10, 20 years,
Yeah.
is the argument many experts are making now,
Which is?
that we might be shifting away from the relatively stable, low inflation era we got used to for a couple of decades, and potentially entering a new era, an era of structurally high and volatile inflation, meaning it might be stickier, more unpredictable, and just a more permanent feature of the economic landscape than we've recently experienced.
Wow. A structural shift. What would be driving that, distinct from the sort of short-term shocks we've seen recently?
Several big, slow-burning structural forces seem to be at play. First, geopolitics and the energy transition. Well, shifting away from relatively cheap and historically stable fossil fuels towards newer, perhaps initially more expensive or intermittent energy sources. That inherently could raise baseline energy costs. Plus, ongoing trade tensions, conflicts, sanctions, they disrupt supply chains and make global trade more expensive than it used to be.
Okay, that makes sense. What else?
Second, there's deglobalization or reshoring. For decades, companies moved production to places with lower costs, which helped keep prices down globally.
Right.
Now, for various reasons, resilience, politics, security, their own comfort, there's a push to bring production closer to home, or at least shorten supply chains.
Yeah.
That often means higher labor costs, higher taxes, more regulations, all pushing costs up compared to the old model.
So reversing the trend that kept prices low.
Potentially, yes. And the third major factor is public debt.
The sheer amount of debt governments have taken on, especially recently.
Exactly. Governments around the world are carrying very high levels of national debt. One way governments have historically dealt with unsustainable debt burdens is, well, to allow or even subtly encourage inflation.
How does that help them?
Inflation erodes the real value of the debt they have to repay. If they owe a fixed amount, say a billion units, and inflation makes each unit worth less over time, the real burden of repaying that billion gets lighter. It's a way to default softly, almost. They might be tempted to, or pressured into, policies that increase the money supply to manage this debt, fueling demand pull pressure.
That's a sobering thought. Are there any counterforces?
Yes, we should acknowledge that. Things like AI, automation, technological advancements, they definitely have the potential to drive down costs and increase productivity in specific sectors. That could offset some inflationary pressures. But the big picture, the structural headwinds we just talked about, energy, geopolitics, deglobalization, debt, seem quite strong and tilted towards more persistent inflation going forward.
So what does the potential future of higher, more volatile inflation mean for that VIOC strategy we discussed?
It basically just reinforces everything. It makes those principles even more critical. If we really are entering an era of sustained, unpredictable inflation, then finding businesses with truly undeniable pricing power, companies that can definitely pass on costs, and those with rock-solid, low-debt balance sheets, that's no longer just a nice-to-have for investors. It becomes absolutely mandatory. A prerequisite for preserving your capital, let alone growing it. You need genuine, high-quality businesses that can weather these long-term storms.
This has been incredibly insightful, a really clear breakdown of what can feel like a very dense, overwhelming topic.
Yeah.
I think the crucial lesson from this deep dive is pretty stark, isn't it?
Yeah.
Inflation is real, it's constant, it's an unavoidable drain on your wealth if you do nothing. So the choice you face really is, are you going to be a victim? Just watching your savings and your fixed income get slowly eroded by that money-nibbling mouse? Or are you going to become proactive? Become an investor whose money is put to work, working hard enough to actually beat inflation and build real wealth over time.
That really is the choice. And perhaps a final thought for you, the listener, to take away, building on that idea of the long game.
Yeah.
The greatest financial security, especially in the kind of potentially volatile future we've discussed, it probably won't come from trying to dodge inflation entirely. That's likely impossible. And it certainly won't come from trying to make quick speculative bets on market moves.
So where does it come from?
It comes from committing to those simple fundamental principles we talked about, finding quality, understanding value, and crucially, having the consistent discipline to stick with it, to regularly invest in those kinds of assets, the ones that generate and transfer wealth to you, instead of having inflation silently consume it away from you. The time to start building that discipline is always today.